Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Big Al, Director with Marketing America, and we're on another conference call tonight, each and every Sunday night at 9:40 Eastern Time, and we're very blessed and fortunate to have Debbie Waldeck on the phone with us. But before we get started, just a reminder, next week at 9:40 we will have Director Don Martin doing prospecting and recruiting, and then the following week we're very honored to have Lori Horn going to talk about how to shop on your web portal and how to navigate the web portal. So you want to make sure in 2 weeks you have your customers online watching how to do this, and give each and everybody, with the holiday seasons coming up and our Pay to Shop program starting effective this coming Thursday. It's just in time for Lori Horn, Supervising Coordinator, to do a webinar on shopping on your own web portal. So again, make sure you take advantage of these calls each and every Sunday and get your organization on these calls and grow your business. But tonight we're very blessed to have Miss Debbie Waldeck from Seattle, Washington. And Debbie's a supervising coordinator in the business, but she also has a lot of other things that we're very proud to have her on the call tonight. As a member of the National Association of Professional Women, she's also pursuing a degree which she'll have a public health degree here in June of 2010 in about 6 or 7 months, so I'm sure she's been working hard for that. And she's also a member of the Speakers Women Conference in Seattle, Washington. So with further ado, let me welcome Debbie.
Thanks a lot, Big Al. I'm really excited to be part of this webinar curriculum. I know that there are, about 1,000 people listening in tonight. And from what I understand, I've had some calls. Some of them are guests, some are preferred customers, and I know the majority are Marketing America business owners. And I'm really excited about being part of this webinar service. It's not a Marketing America sanctioned training, but it's a great opportunity for all of us business owners to come together and share ideas and information. And, I would imagine if I'm sitting there, the question is this presentation for you? And the real question is, who's going to benefit from this information tonight, and what are our goals? Now, while I'm speaking this evening, I am confident that a lot of names are going to come to your mind. Friends, loved ones, children's, family, classmates. So please get a pencil and paper and write those names down. In fact, I remember being in Richmond, Virginia some years ago doing a seminar, and one of the comments were that the area was having a difficult time gathering a names list. And so I said the same thing at the beginning. Here's 2 cards. One is for questions and one is to write your names list based on names that come to your mind. And you'll be surprised as we go through this presentation how many do. And in the end, I said, give me those names, and I would conduct a three-way phone call with the people with the most names, the top 5 people with most names on their list. Well, at lunchtime, we collected those cards, and what happened were there was close to 2,000 names out of an audience of about 150 people sitting there, names that came to your mind, and I'm confident that there's information here that would help those people. And if you find this information useful, I'm happy to post a summary of this presentation on my website so you can have access to that. But this evening, I'm going to give you a great deal of information, and I don't want you to worry about taking in every detail. Rather, I want you to just sit back, relax, take a deep breath, and in the end, ask yourself, does this make sense? And so what I'm going to do is just to start and introduce myself and really talk about our frame of mind. There's a reality that exists right now that this generation is the first generation in the history of mankind predicted to not live as long as its parents. That's a travesty. I know many people are aware of the increases in autoimmune diseases, chronic inflammatory conditions, children's diseases. In fact, there's been a 700% in ADHD prescriptions since 1992. You can see here a 1,000+% increase in autism in the same amount of time. But what's also interesting, and what few people understand, is that there's also been a 56% increase in prescription antacids for children under the age of 4. So I'm going to share with you how there is a profound relationship between how well we are and how we assimilate our nutrition, because the reality is this is not as good as it gets. It's like anymore, people are treating disease like the boogeyman. People are terrified of swine flu. People are terrified of cancers and whatnot. And it's like the boogeyman in that they feel they have no control, that it's going to get them in the middle of the night. They don't know where it's coming from or what time it's going to come. But the reality is that as we understand how our immune system operates and how we can do very specific things to prevent ourselves and to improve our immune system so that we have a much greater chance of staying healthy. I'm also going to show how in doing so we actually produce a body that's aging more slowly. There's not much difference between aging and toxicity, really. And so let me just start by kind of giving you a background of how I came upon this information. And in reality, that image up there that you see is a thyroid. And about 20 years ago, I'm from Southern Virginia originally, though I live out here in the rainy state of Seattle. And about 20 years ago, I was married very young, and I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And when I was diagnosed with this autoimmune disease, it was very unusual for someone my age to have an autoimmune disease, and I was diagnosed with what's called Graves' disease, which is a hyperactive thyroid. And when it was diagnosed, my heart rate, my resting heart rate was 156. And so for all you fitness buffs out there that wear your little heart monitor on your wrist, 156 is what you want it to be when you're in the middle of an aerobic class or riding a bike up a hill, certainly not just sitting in your chair. And so I was given medication for this condition, and today in the physician's desk reference it suggests that you not take that medication if you become pregnant. And I'm not sure if it's there because of people like me, but in fact I did become pregnant during this time and had complications through the pregnancy to the degree that I was told to abort the baby. And in fact, I listened to this small, still voice inside that suggested different. It suggested that, in fact, I would have a healthy baby boy. And so I decided to move forward. And in fact, our son was born October the 19th with a significant heart defect. He had what's called a large ventricular septal defect. And what that means is that between the right and left chambers of the lower heart, the right and left ventricle, there's a wall that's supposed to separate it, obviously, into 4 chambers. But he had a hole in this wall, and that allowed oxygenated blood to move into the right chamber where normally the deoxygenated blood goes on into the lungs, which is normal. Unfortunately, when that blood moves into the lungs and it has oxygen in it, it causes a whole lot of problems like pulmonary hypertension, which is increased pressure in the lungs. And the bottom line is that for the first 7 years of his life, he was very ill. And all I can say is I'm glad I didn't listen because, in fact, during those first 7 years, I was studying nutrition as a lot of people on this call do today. And in fact, I meet people, matter of fact, just yesterday I was at a lecture, and this girl comes up to me that was very overweight, and she said no matter what she does, she can't lose weight. The only thing that she can do is to not eat. The question is, how many people do you know that have made positive changes with their diet, but for some reason they haven't seen an improvement to really match the efforts that's going forward? They may still feel fatigued or still have challenges losing weight or still have challenges with whatever autoimmune disease, though they're reading the internet and all the books and they're trying to do everything right, good fats, good carbs, bad carbs. And the reality was back in the early 90s, I was following Dr. Oz's protocol. I already had removed hydrogenated fats. We had removed, food coloring, and we're eating complex carbs and doing all the right things. But unfortunately, each year we were met with a new diagnosis, whether it was respiratory airway disease or asthma or eczema or ADHD. In fact, those were all the diagnoses. And so after 7 years of following the direction that was coming to me really from the media and the medical arena, I thought, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And so what I began to do as a desperate mother was really just to journal everything that goes in and everything that goes out in terms of food and monitor the behavior and see if I could just try to find some sort of common denominator. What was it that I was missing? And in fact, after about 7 years, I noticed when I was doing this journaling that there was behaviors that I could create just based on what I was putting into his mouth. Now, for instance, ADHD, and I know out of 1,000 people on this call, probably most everybody on this call knows somebody whose child has been diagnosed with ADHD, or even as an adult if they wonder if they themselves have it. And in fact, we are now prescribing, as you well know, amphetamines for these children, and it's something that concerns me greatly because the reality is that those kinds of conditions are conditions of the quote-unquote brain. And if that's the case, then why could I create that behavior based on what was going into the mouth? And so, for instance, in this example, I had him write his name, and then I fed him a small amount of peanut butter on toast, and I waited 15 minutes, and I asked him to write his name again. Now, obviously, I can't explain to you or show to you the changes in behavior. that you are experiencing with your children who are suffering from chronic food allergies, again, ADD, autistic spectrum disorder, and all these conditions, adults that are experiencing chronic fatigues, fibromyalgia, but you know how you feel, and I use this illustration because it's the best way to kind of show you, obviously, a change in some sort of cognitive function. And I'm thinking, okay, this is not the brain. There's something going on in the gut. And so for that reason, I began to become a student of the intestinal area, if you will. And what I'm going to share with you today is that there is a profound relationship between our health and the health of the intestinal area, to the degree that once we understand it, that there is no need to be afraid of the boogeyman. And I'm even going to show you some compelling research that's been released literally in the last week that'll blow you away with regards to even obesity and this situation. But the reality is that when I apply the principles I'm going to share with you this evening, those conditions that you saw listed earlier with our children, with our son, were completely eliminated. And in fact, our son graduated with a straight A's with an International Baccalaureate curriculum. And in fact, in April of this past year, received a congressional appointment to the United States Military Academy. And it was quite an experience that allowed me to sit down and put this on paper because I felt I couldn't hold this information back any longer. We had 90 seconds to say goodbye in New York at West Point, and 8 hours later, 1,304 young men, 15% women, were trained, custom fitted, and marching in formation. And I was so proud of this country with the duty, honor, the integrity, honesty, discipline. And in fact, I thought back and thought, what if I had listened to everything I was told? What if I didn't look? And I realized that it's not the cards we're dealt, it's how we deal with them. And in fact, what I'd like to do is to share with you how the gut does train the immune system. And of course, in any discussion about health and wellness today, we have to put this kind of disclaimer up, which suggests that this presentation has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, and that everything that I'm going to say, including any products, are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, as I'm sure you all have heard this before. But let's go back to talking about who this presentation is for. When I start looking at children today, we know that healthy children are happy children. And I'm asking you, when you're writing these names down, who do you know with ADD, ADHD, allergies and food allergies, asthma, autism, including autistic spectrum disorder, bedwetting, bipolar, bruising, easy bruising, GI problems like constipation, depression. In fact, our children are being so massively diagnosed with not only amphetamines for the ADHD, but antidepressants in children that are very, very young, earaches and eczema. And the list goes on, but the reality that I'm going to show you guys is all of these situations have the same thing in common. And I'm not going to say whether it's the chicken or the egg, but I will say that when I came across this information and I saw, wow, that there was this common denominator, and people have things as minor as allergies to as serious as cancer, all I felt that I could do is to address that situation, really not knowing at the time that it would eliminate so many other problems. And so I started looking at adults today. And the question I always ask is, how are you feeling? And do you have a great deal of energy? Are you optimistic? Are you focused? Do you complete tasks early? Do you laugh often? Do you take medications? Are you feeling fine, or are you feeling fantastic? In fact, yesterday we were at a product training in Seattle, Washington, which is outstanding. Dr. Mylan Moore was one of the presenters, a number of other great presenters that had just attended the Market America Dallas Product Symposium. And I had an opportunity to speak on the product, the AGE, or AGE product, which I will talk a little bit about tonight in this presentation. But what was so fun is that one of our partners came running up and mentioned that she had been taking it for just 3 weeks. And she says, I'm not real sure. She goes, for my whole life, Mondays were the days that I would clean my house and do my laundry and do all these kinds of things, and then I would go on with my week. And she goes, but in the last couple of years, it seems like Mondays spread out all week long, and I never was getting it done. And she goes, and I started taking that product, and she goes, and I realized after just a week or two that the Monday came and I completed my task, and she was marveling. And what I'm going to show you today, you guys, is that when we understand why something is working, what happens then is we're far more motivated to make a difference. And so what we're going to talk about is really changing, again, that frame of reference. For instance, people are constantly, with this baby boom generation, asking, how old are you? Or I constantly hear people tell me, who are as early as in their 30s to wherever they're going to go, I'm old. And the question I always ask is, how old are you? And the answer that I give is, I'm not. And I'll tell you, the reason is there is a profound relationship between chronological age or metabolic age and what we do. So for instance, look at this. Did you know that the arteries of obese children are that of a 45-year-old? And so if that's the case, then how old are they? And what we're going to see is that these children also have something in common that relates to their intestinal area. So we're going to begin to see this common denominator that persists among children who are obese, children who are depressed, adults that have autoimmune challenges, adults that have inflammatory conditions. And this is that common denominator that I set out to correct. So what I want you to do this evening is to think about not becoming desensitized to what's in the news. It's becoming normal that we're living on allergy medications, medicines for depression, medicines for PMS. I mean, my goodness, we have medicines for everything. And it's becoming our new normal. And it's my hope today that no longer does this become our new normal. In fact, let me show you something. You're going to hear a lot about this intestinal area as it relates to the immune system. And this is far more than a discussion about colon cleansing or liver cleansing, as you're going to see here momentarily. But just this past week, a study was released showing that scientists say that the bacteria found in a baby's intestinal area can predict whether or not they would become overweight later in life. And according to the study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, the numbers of bifidobacteria associated with the number of staph would predict whether that child would become obese. So when you read on down, University of Turku scientists claim that the bifidobacteria are prevalent in the intestines of breastfed babies, putting these babies at a lower risk of obesity. The question is, what's in that would cause this to be the case? And that's what we're going to discuss today. What if you didn't breastfeed or you were not? I mean, can you correct this? Previous studies have reported that the breastfed babies had a 13 to 22% lowered risk of overweight or obesity in childhood. It is my hope that this discussion today will precede even the Transitions Rocks program as we begin to address this. Now, please understand that I'm not saying that this is the only cause of obesity, and certainly the fact that children sitting in front of televisions hours and hours a day or in front of their video games for hours a day certainly contributes. Fast food, eating high glycemic meals, skipping meals, certainly all that participates. But the reality is there is still a common denominator, and the integrity of the intestinal bacteria, and I'm going to use a word, intestinal ecology, which defines the mix between, for instance, this bifidobacteria and the staph, the mix between the good and the bad. And that mix has a function that will participate in producing a normal immune system or a hyperactive immune system. A lot of people get the immune system pretty confused. There's actually 3 different states that our immune system will be in. It's either normal and healthy, it's either hyperactive, or it's suppressed. Like, for instance, in AIDS or HIV, that is a person with a literally suppressed immune system. But the reality is that most conditions that we're dealing with today, to include allergies, asthma, eczema, psoriasis, lupus, MS, those conditions are a function of a hyperactive immune system. And so the question is, what's causing this immune system to overact, to overreact? Why is it 2 women walk in the mall and walk into a fragrance store and one gets a migraine headache and the other does not? Why is it 2 people smell cigarette smoke and one gets a headache and one does not? Why is it that 2 people approach their 30s and one is diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and one is not? The question is it all genetic? And so as we look at this, and for those of you who are Market America business owners and those of you who are customers, we're going to discuss the whys to the protocols. It's really about the feature and benefit discussion. Yeah, it's one thing to say we're great, but what does that really mean? And in fact, what I've found is that when people understand the true benefit of what they're doing, as I say here today, motivation to make a change comes when the pain of the current situation is greater than the pain of making a change. I remember a story when I came up with this quote. There was a story of a kitten or a cat that was in a house fire, and that cat went into the fire 5 times to retrieve its kittens, each time getting burned a little bit more. And I thought, my gosh, how come so many of us are too tired to make a change? And I realized that there's so much information out there, and I appreciate that. I mean, there's information from every which way. Antioxidants are good, antioxidants are bad. Sugar causes hyperactivity, sugar doesn't cause hyperactivity, and certainly we're overwhelmed. And so what I'm hoping to do this evening is to show you that root issue to the degree that the why is so profound in your mind that making that change is going to be something that's achievable. This statement by Michelangelo, I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set him free, is one that truly inspires me, because some people just see the marble and they don't see the beauty behind it. And that's what when we have children that are sick, when we have adults that are sick, we're not able to live to our fullest potential. So you as business owners out there, don't fall into the vendor trap. You are more than a sales rep, a product rep. You are a customer manager. And for all of you who are customers out there, please understand that your customer manager has spent countless hours learning about this information to share this with a number of people. The reality is that in 2005, the pharmaceutical industry made $256 billion in profit. Of that, they spent $56 billion in marketing and $13 billion in research. Of the $56 billion that was spent in marketing, over $60,000 in free samples were given to 700,000 plus physicians, and $5 billion was spent in advertisement to us, to the consumer. It's time for the individual to begin getting this information and sharing it with others, because the reality is there are answers. We are consultants, and we have an opportunity to share this information. And so let's look at the prescription for an autoimmune disease and how to avoid it. There's that boogeyman again, and what I want you to do is to not be afraid that just because your mother had it means you will too. In fact, I've had numerous discussions with geneticists, and we would argue about the inevitability of disease based on genetics. But the reality is that, yes, genetically, we have predispositions, and the kind of happy medium we came to with the geneticist and me was genetically, whatever that predisposition is like being born with a loaded pistol in your pocket. But what you do in your lifestyle determines whether you pull that trigger or not. And the more we know, what if a person were doing things and was completely ignorant of how that might participate in a disease state? Then they would have no opportunity to make certain choices that would prevent that potential disease state. So what we're going to do is take a closer look at the immune system, and then we're going to take a look at how the immune system participates or is driven by the development of the intestinal area. And I want to share with you that when I came to this conclusion about 12 years ago with regards to that food pyramid that I showed you and seeing this relationship in gut health, it was that led me to Market America. Market America, I wasn't approached by somebody to the degree that, come sell this product. I was looking for nutrition that was in essence already digested as part of the formula, as part. And 12 years ago I found that in this company called Market America. They had nutritional products that were in essence already digested, and I'm sure you've heard the term isotonic. But the reality is that over these last 12 years, I'm so proud to see that numerous products have been added, numerous services including Nutrimetrics, the Nutrimetrics Education Institute, the certifications for transitions lifestyle coaches, and the Spectrum Autistic line that's been added, that has truly rounded out this protocol to the degree that we can talk about it today and have everything in our hands to make a difference if we only know how. So when we look at the immune system, on the left is a lymph cell. On the right is that glowing thing is called a thymus. And these are things that we kind of understand as part of our immune system. In fact, when a baby is born, that thymus is about the size of their heart. And as we age, it shrinks down to about the size of a peanut. But when we really think about the lymph system, we kind of probably think first about a lymph node. We know if we have a swollen lymph node that we have some sort of infection. Well, that lymph node represents a part of our entire immune system, our lymphatic system. And this immune system is comprised of something called lymphatic tissue. And the reality is that this immune system is throughout our entire body. I don't know if you've ever seen the Bodies exposition that tours the country. It's an amazing thing to see, for instance, just the circulatory system presented and the lymphatic system presented, but it is as pervasive in our body as our circulatory system, so it's everywhere. But each part of this immune system has a name, if you will. Each of the names ends with associated lymphatic tissue, or the letters ALT. So for instance, in our lungs, we have this bronchial associated lymphatic tissue, and when we have a disruption in the vault, there's asthma. In the nasal passages, we have nasal associated lymphatic tissue, so NALT, NALT, and we have chronic sinus issues, for instance. It can even participate in ear infections. In the skin, it's eczema. So you begin to see that this ALT, don't get confused by that. It just represents the different areas of our lymphatic system. But the reality is that all that I have up here on the screen represents about 30% of our immune system. And so if all of that is 30% of our immune system, the question that I had was, well, where's the other 70%? And in fact, 70% of our immune system is called gut-associated lymphatic tissue, and of course resides alongside the intestinal tract. And so how could we not understand then that the health of the intestinal area affects the gut-associated lymphatic tissue? There is a profound relationship, and this is why I say that the gut trains the immune system. But the question is how? And we can only think, for instance, with the dramatic increase in antacids, for instance, Nexium, Prilosec, the purple pill, Tums, the list goes on. We constantly are doing things that affects this part of the body, and we're not even relating it to the fact that it may also be affecting our immune system. Most medications that are on the market today have a side effect that causes some sort of GI disruption. So certainly there's a relationship. And so let's take a look and see how it's related, because I want us to kind of put it into perspective. In fact, if 70% of my immune system is in the intestinal area or related to the intestinal area, then I want you to think about the entire lymphatic system. That's what's in your lungs, that's what's in your nasal passages, that's what's in your eye. All of that is connected, just like rivers and streams. And so I have these images of water here. Well, if that's the case, wouldn't you agree that if there was one area that was polluted, that it's going to be manifest and seen in other parts of the body? So what if, for instance, there was a relationship between asthma and the GI tract, or eczema and the GI tract, or autoimmune disease and the GI tract? In fact, new research now shows that women who take antacids during pregnancy, children have a much higher rate of asthma, for instance. So once again, it's getting back to understanding this and asking ourselves what we can do. And so the reality is that to improve our health, we must improve the health of our intestinal area, which means we will then improve that gut-associated lymphatic tissue. And since that's 70% of our body, that's a pretty good positive that we're adding to our entire immune system. So this is the part where it gets a lot of fun, and maybe something you've not heard a whole lot about. But the immune system that we all think about is inside. And again, that's what's in our lungs, that's what's in our nasal passages, but we actually have an immune system that's outside of our body. In fact, all of those places I was talking about, the lungs, the nasal passages, the gut, have mucous membranes, and those parts are outside of our body. And a lot of people think that the intestinal area is inside the body, so we eat an apple, we chew it up, we swallow it, it's inside. You guys, it's not inside until that apple has been broken down, digested, assimilated, and absorbed. And the second that apple enters the bloodstream, it's then inside the body. So everything that happens in the GI tract and the lungs is actually outside of our body. And so here's a funny picture where within our intestinal area, and I'm going to speak about that right now rather than the rest of the outside of the immune system, but within our intestinal area, we have these special antibodies called secretory IgA antibodies, or SIgA. And I'm going to just say it's IgA for short. And these guys kind of act like the bouncers that you see down there in the right corner, or those guards. And what they do is when they see a foreign protein on the outside of us that we're exposed to, they destroy it before the inside of the immune system sees it. So imagine, for instance, that on any given day, your intestinal tract is exposed to more virus, bacteria, and foreign proteins than the inside of your immune system would see in a lifetime. On any given day, this intestinal tract is exposed to more foreign proteins than the inside of your body would see in a lifetime. And our body was designed knowing that. So the propensity of these antibodies is incredibly important to protecting and keeping our immune system normal and healthy versus hyperactive. If we lose these guards and these bouncers, then we're going to have more proteins that the inside of our immune system is going to see. And unfortunately, when any protein, whether it's strep or staph or protein from undigested foods, when any protein is in the inside of the body, there's a much greater chance for inflammatory conditions and autoimmune disease. And autoimmune disease is kind of like friendly fire. Our own body somehow made a mistake and attacked us. For instance, in MS, it's attacked our myelin sheath, which is a covering on the nerves. In rheumatoid arthritis, it's attacked the joints. And so how do we minimize this risk of autoimmune disease? And so take a look at this. This represents a protein. So for instance, this top chain represents, let's say, a protein in the brain. Now, a protein is hundreds of amino acids long. There's 20 different amino acids, and so I have different colors to represent a different amino acid. If you kind of think about a combination on a lock, back in high school, you had a locker on your, a lock on your locker, and you might have had a combination that was 3, 16, 25. Typically, there was 3 numbers, right? Well, imagine remembering a combination on a lock that's hundreds of amino acids long, and it can be one of 20 numbers. You'd have a combination that was 200 numbers long, and you had to remember one of 20 numbers. Well, the way the body works is when the immune system sees a foreign protein, so for instance, here's a strep protein. And again, this is not a real one. I'm just using this for illustrative purposes. But here's a strep protein, and it's got different amino acids. But a small sequence of those amino acids is the same on the brain as it is on the strep. So the body sees this strep, and it goes, I've got to attack it. And rather than remembering the entire sequence of that protein's amino acids, it looks for a small sequence. And unfortunately, that same sequence is on a protein in the brain. And now we have obsessive-compulsive disorder in an 8-year-old. And in fact, today, they're treating the sudden onset of obsessive-compulsive disorder with antibiotics for strep. So now, we can see that there's a relationship. When the body sees a foreign protein, there's an opportunity that in making the antibody to attack that foreign protein, friendly fire occurs, and by accident, some part of our body is attacked. So this, of course, is something we don't want, but the reality is that foreign proteins can hide when there's an abundance of probiotics and prebiotics in the intestinal area, which produce an abundance of those IgA antibodies, like our bouncers on the outside, like those guards on the outside. And when those guards see that, for instance, let's say it was strep, when those guards see that strep on the outside, they kind of cloak it, making it invisible to our immune system. They degrade it and they destroy it, and in so doing, eliminate or remove or mitigate an immune response and inflammation. So we start to see how important the development of this intestinal tract is to our overall health. So when I started to see all that, the question I had was, okay, well, how the heck do you do all this? How do you develop this, Galt? And what do I have here at my disposal that can make a difference? And in fact, this gut-associated lymphatic tissue, which is supposed to be teeming with these protective antibodies on the outside, is developed in the beginning, initially. And that goes back to that study regarding obesity that is now more prevalent in children who have an imbalance in this area. So how does all that happen? Well, the reality is that when a child is born, their intestinal tract is completely sterile because it has mother's amniotic fluid in it. But during the birthing process, the child will swallow vaginal fluid, and that fluid is teeming with bacteria, both good and bad, that is the initial inoculation that that child's immune system is going to receive. So if you think about a mother who's suffered from certain infections, strep, staph, yeast infections, then there's more of that the child gets. In fact, I was reading a study in the Seattle Times, and it said that there's a 70% increase in C-sections across the country. And in fact, children that are born C-section have a much higher amount of E. coli in their intestinal area. So the point is that they've missed out on a beneficial inoculation, and they didn't have enough of the good bacteria to counter the bad bacteria. So in having that initial inoculation, we have an opportunity to start out stronger. The second way it develops is really the way the child is fed, and this directly impacts the immune system. So how does that work? Well, obviously, there's an image of a child with formula and an image of a child that's nursing. In the 1920s and 30s, evaporated milk became widely commercially available at low prices. The affordable price of evaporated milk and the availability of the home icebox initiated a tremendous rise in the use of evaporated milk formulas. By the late 1930s, the use of evaporated milk in the United States surpassed all commercial formulas, and by the 1950s, over half of all babies in the United States were reared on such formulas. And so you guys, for the first time in the history of mankind, more than half of the population missed out on this critical inoculation and development of a certain part of the immune system that began to promote a more hyperactive immune system. So, for instance, what is it in this breast milk that makes all this difference? And in fact, breast milk, of course, has vitamins and enzymes, but I'm going to speak about these three components. It's 1/3 protein, which of course has calories and provides for muscle development and growth. It's 1/3 fat, which of course offers calories and helps with the development of the nervous system and the brain and helps with growth. But there's 1/3 of a very special component that was really only named 10 years ago and has not been in any formula for 70 years. And in fact, today, you will find it in few special needs formulas. But as I'm going to speak, for instance, about the autistic spectrum products that we have, those products are not at all only for children with autistic spectrum disorder. I'm going to show you them. They're for all of them. And in fact, they're for people who also have issues with their own autoimmune disease and inflammatory conditions, and I'm going to show you why. So 1/3 of mother's milk that was not identified, that was not in formulas, is something called oligosaccharides, which is a generic term is prebiotic. And it's funny, you're just now starting to see a few commercials about it, I think, in pet food. Unfortunately, I think the vets were ahead of all of us, maybe. But the reality is that these special oligosaccharides means few sugars. And the concern that people have had falsely is that because it says sugar, that it's going to promote yeast growth or growth of harmful pathogens in the intestinal area. But that is totally untrue, as I'll show you in a moment. These oligosaccharides have very few calories. But what research shows is the more oligosaccharides in the gut, the more IgA antibodies there are. These oligosaccharides act like a fiber rather than sugar. They do not provide calories. What they do is they move into the intestinal area and they ferment like a fiber does, but in so doing, they promote the growth of the probiotics. They help to develop the immune system, and they create a hypoactive, and I mean normal or healthy versus hyperactive immune system. In fact, they temper a hyperactive immune system, evidenced by asthmas, allergies, eczema, food allergies, and the list goes on. So what's interesting is in looking at all of this, one other component in mother's milk is something called L-glutamine. L-glutamine is an amino acid that bodybuilders use because bodybuilders are tearing down their muscle with the hope of building it back up again, and in so doing, L-glutamine helps with tissue recovery. Well, the intestinal tract breaks down also, it sloughs off very rapidly, which it's designed to do, but glutamine helps to build it up. The reality that I'm going to show you is that this glutamine, when we have an intestinal area which is out of balance, the body's using up its glutamine stores dramatically fast, and two things happen with that. First of all, glutamine is used in the body's pH regulation system. So when a body is acidic or somewhat acidic and it needs to buffer that acidity, glutamine is used. So when we're burning it all up, we've got a problem. The other thing is glutamine is a precursor to glutathione. And glutathione is an incredibly powerful antioxidant that we cannot buy. It's not in a pill form. It's something our bodies make. And it works abundantly in the body to get rid of toxins, heavy metals, and to reduce oxidation. Oxidative stress is seen in children who have autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and numerous health conditions. Patients with diabetes and cardiovascular disease have low glutathione levels. Cancer patients have low glutathione levels. And what's interesting is patients who are obese that have high glutathione levels don't develop type 2 diabetes as rapidly as those who are obese with low glutathione levels who then develop type 2 diabetes. So there's a benefit to this glutathione, which is reducing oxidative stress. But what I'm proposing is that when the intestinal area is out of balance, there's an unusual amount of glutathione that is used up. Glutamine is found in our fiber, our spectrum enzymes, for instance. So this glutamine is part of what makes this glutathione, and glutathione is used in the liver dramatically. That is where it's used more than anything, and there's something called phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification, and this again is a simple discussion because enzymes are used and many things are used, but I'm going to speak just about glutathione right now. But when the liver sees any toxins, anything that must be cleansed, of course, what it will do is basically turn on free radicals, kind of like turning on a fire to burn them up. And in phase 2 detoxification, the glutathione comes along as a powerful antioxidant to quench and put out the fire. So I've got my fireman, which is the glutathione, and the fire is the free radicals. And so this is what happens in the liver. So then why would an intestinal area which is out of balance compromise this system? And the reason is that when the intestinal area is out of balance, or what few people maybe understand, is that blood that leaves the brain goes first to the heart for oxygen. Blood that leaves the reproductive system goes first to the heart for oxygenation. But blood that leaves the intestinal area goes first to the liver to be cleansed before it goes to the brain. So the liver, if you will, is the heart of the intestinal area. So again, if I have an intestinal area which is compromised, then blood will move from the intestinal area, go to the liver, and I'm using up that glutathione because I have a tremendous amount of toxins and proteins and such that now the body is trying to get rid of. And so the glutathione, I already had this slide, the glutathione then is being used up, which is going to participate in more oxidative stress, which participates in aging, which participates in vulnerability to medications or even some of the components that are in vaccines and such. And so it's important to correct the health of the intestinal area. And I use this analogy. It's like our boat is leaking and we don't know it. We're just in the boat and we're trying new vitamins, new diets, and it's like we're in that leaking boat and we got a big old bucket and we're dumping that water, but we haven't fixed the boat. And so to fix the boat, we must address the health of the intestinal area and then supplement with antioxidants and products that support our own body's creation of glutathione, which include enzymes, which include probiotics and prebiotics, L-glutamine, fiber, antioxidants like CoQ10, OPC, resveratrol, minerals like selenium. And the thing is, people are running around doing liver cleanses and whatnot, but their boat's leaking. So in order to have a more effective cleanse protocol, you want to first address the health of the intestinal area and then follow it with a liver cleanse, if you will. But the reality is, you guys, when you think about the fact that the baby boom generation was the first generation in the history of mankind where more than half were taken off of breast milk and given formulas. They were then newly exposed to antibiotics like penicillin, new vaccines. They were exposed to microwaves, preservatives, chemicals, fast food. McDonald's was born in 1947. It was the perfect storm. These children grew up with less of an inoculation in their intestinal area, more propensity towards hyperactive immune system. They then birth the next generation who are now born through a birth canal with less of a quality inoculation, and they weren't nursed. Generation next, this continues and persists. And now we have Generation RX, where the growing majority are still fed formulas, and even if they're nursed, the reality is that what a mother is giving is less complete than what was 60 or so years ago, because the reduction in the inoculation from one generation to the next. And in fact, as I've mentioned, with all of this, we've seen these dramatic increases in these conditions, all which are a function of increased oxidative stress. Certainly autism is. And the reality, if you could just see that 56% in prescription antacids, wouldn't you think for just a moment, based on what you've heard thus far, that maybe, just maybe, it's not a function of too much stomach acid, but maybe, just maybe, their intestinal tract is compromised, and that we can do something about it? As I've mentioned, the components and the antibiotics, chemicals, the chlorinated water, the toxins that's in our water have affected this flora to the degree that we're seeing this increases. So it's time for us to do something. The reality is probiotics alone are not enough. It's like throwing grass seed on hard, stripped, barren soil. And that's where, again, it's great that 10 or so years ago we started talking about colon cleanses, and then 8 or so years ago we started talking about probiotics. And there's a lot of your friends that have taken those things and haven't noticed a real big improvement, and I believe that they haven't had the whole picture. The reality is that an intestinal tract of a newborn is like that barren soil. So is one from a person who's been exposed to multiple rounds of antibiotics, high sugar, stress, and so on. And without the abundance of the beneficial bacteria, there's no protection from the pathogens. There's more, I have weeds there, but I mean, strep is higher in the intestinal area, staph is higher, E. coli is higher in these people who have not understood how to develop this intestinal area more optimally. So the reality is, to do that, we want to prepare the soil, if you will, the intestinal tract, if you will. And what we know today that can do that is things like glutamine and aloe, which helps to reduce the inflammation in the intestinal wall, that promotes an environment where probiotics and the good bacteria is more ready to grow. Prebiotics is fuel for the bacteria, kind of like putting fertilizer on the lawn, and then the probiotics act like grass seed. It's important, and along with this protocol, we're also following a low glycemic index diet, because we want to make sure that we're regulating our blood sugar, that we're keeping our sugars low, because of course many of us understand that a high sugar diet promotes the growth of pathogens in our intestinal area. So in combination, we've got Transitions Lifestyle System, we've got a phenomenal detox vegetable cleanse, but in adding things like the glutamine, prebiotics, and probiotics, we can promote an even enhanced improvement with these protocols. So some of the products that include this is we have our aloe line, we have glutamine in our Spectrum enzymes, our fiber, and our AGE product, which is phenomenal. I love that product. We have prebiotics, which have numerous names. You might see it as a form of inulin. You might see it in the form of fructooligosaccharide, and then, of course, the word prebiotics. But we have prebiotics in our greens, our fiber, and our prime bone maintenance formula, which I'm going to speak about in just a second. And then, of course, we have probiotics in our digestive enzyme product, our fiber. So you see that fiber is everywhere you see it, the Spectrum probiotics, and in our greens. But the reality is the gut trains the immune system, as you can see here, and a healthy and balanced gut offers protection that reduces certain inflammatory conditions and the propensity for autoimmune disease. So for instance, in our NutriClean Advanced Fiber product, you see that there's L-glutamine. I hope after this discussion there's a new appreciation for that L-glutamine. There's also the prebiotics called inulin. You can see that fructooligosaccharide, and that's a nice amount at 5,000 milligrams. And then, of course, there's a probiotic blend as well. So this fiber powder is really a phenomenal product, because you don't see a lot of fiber products on the market that include all three of those components. Typically, you've got to go and buy the L-glutamine, buy your fiber, buy your probiotics, buy your prebiotics if you can find them. We have our Vitamin Spectrum, a phenomenal product. And again, this is not just for children who have autistic spectrum conditions. This is for children who, if you have a child that has asthma, eczema, allergies, food allergies, and you understand this discussion, the relationship between the intestinal area, then here's an opportunity to provide the glutamine as well as digestive enzymes. And the digestive enzymes will eliminate the amount of foreign proteins that the body might see because they're doing their job. They're breaking proteins down. Of course, our probiotic spectrum line has an abundance of probiotics, unlike our digestive enzyme formula, which includes only one probiotic, which is Lactobacillus sporogenes, although that's a great probiotic because it's known to really do well at eliminating toxins in the intestinal area, and it's very hardy, meaning if you were to go to sporogenes.com, for instance, it is a probiotic that does not need to be refrigerated. It will work whether the probiotic is living or dead. Actually, the husks still participate in improving the health of the intestinal area. Our complete greens product includes the probiotic culture blend, but also you see there the fructooligosaccharides, which is why I love this product, along with all the other components that help to provide some of the nutrients that you find in greens, as well as the properties that help to keep the body more alkaline. And then our Prime Bone Maintenance Formula. I think this might be an undersold product. In fact, it includes inulin, and I'm sorry that that's pretty fuzzy, but it's 3,400 milligrams of inulin. And in fact, Pepsi-Cola paid for a study a few years back where they took several hundred teenagers and they gave half of them inulin or a prebiotic, and the other half was their control group. And what they saw is those that were taking the prebiotic had improved bone density, improved calcium absorption. And so there's evidence that the prebiotics participates in improving the absorption of nutrients in the intestinal tract. It also, of course, includes bonestein. And what, with this huge increase in osteoporosis in our nation, and because this presentation is only about an hour, and I'm already, about 51 minutes into it, I'm just about done here, I can't get into the relationship between the intestinal area and pH like I'd love to, but I will tell you briefly that the bacteria in the intestinal area produce acids. For instance, acidophilus means acid-loving bacteria. And in producing those acids, they create in the intestinal area a slightly acidic environment, which is ideal. And in so doing, those acids actually kill harmful pathogens. For instance, in Canada a few months ago, there was an outbreak of listeria where people ate tainted meat. And what's such a shame is 1 year earlier in Europe was a study that showed that a specific probiotic, which was salivarius, actually produced acids that killed listeria. And so the fact of the matter is that there are certain problems, even lactose intolerance, that could be related, or some of it, to an intestinal area whose pH is too high that the actual lactase enzyme simply can't work. It's there, but it can't work because there's not enough good bacteria that's producing the pH that's optimal. It's allowing pathogens to grow, and it's even keeping enzymes from working. And I believe that's part of the reason why children who have this imbalance have more propensity towards obesity, because they're having a difficult time actually absorbing their nutrients. So again, don't be afraid that oligosaccharides are a sugar that's going to promote yeast growth. They do not. They act more like a fiber and ferment, promoting the probiotics in the gut, which is ideal. So when you start summarizing this and you start thinking about the immune system, I want you to think about the immune system is enhanced when we understand the development of the gut in the intestinal area must be inoculated with probiotics. These probiotics must be developed with prebiotics. The pH of the intestines must be optimal to promote growth of good bacteria and to eliminate growth of pathogens. Probiotics and prebiotics help develop the special antibody called IgA, which is a bouncer on the outside that keeps us from having such a propensity towards friendly fire on the inside. And the developed gut produces a hypoactive or normal and healthy immune system rather than a hyperactive immune system, evidenced by asthmas and allergies, and the list goes on. A dysfunctional gut increases oxidative stress, and I showed you that phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. And so the question really is, feeling old, feeling toxic, well, what's the difference? We want to put out the fire, reduce oxidative stress, take strong antioxidants like OPC3, and improve the health of the gut, which not only improves health but also slows the aging process, because aging is a function of oxidative stress. In just taking a second about how the gut, even here, relates to other things that we didn't really think about. Cholesterol issues, for instance. How the heck does that relate to the gut? Well, bile is made, as we all know, in the gallbladder, and it's made of cholesterol. Matter of fact, if you've ever seen your cat vomit, it's that yellow bile. That is cholesterol. bile is secreted in the small intestines to emulsify fat. So kind of like Dawn dishwashing liquid in our sink takes the big fat and drops it, makes it into smaller fat droplets. Well, that's what happens in our intestinal area. When we eat fat, bile is secreted with cholesterol that actually emulsifies the fat, making it into small little droplets that can then be absorbed. The problem is years ago, we might have had a high-fiber diet. And the fiber that would follow, for instance, let's say you have a nice big piece of toast that's got 10 grams of fiber and your butter on it, and you have fat from the butter. You then secrete bile to emulsify that fat, but the fiber in the bread would carry the bile and the cholesterol on out. Well, now, since the average American eats about 8 grams of fiber a day, when we do eat fat and we secrete that cholesterol or bile to emulsify it, there's no fiber to wash out the cholesterol, and so it's absorbed into the arterial system. Once again, there's that relationship between the gut and the intestines. And, you know, it's funny, we see these commercials, take the Cheerio challenge, eat your oatmeal. Well, the reality, guys, is if you heard the whole story, increase your fiber to 35 grams a day and watch and see what happens to your cholesterol. And it's not just that. Let's look at the arteries. You've got a normal, healthy artery on the left and coronary artery disease on the right. And obviously, we understand that when plaque is laid down in our artery, we have more chance for atherosclerosis, which would lead and can lead to strokes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease. But think about it like this. For instance, your artery is, when plaque is laid down, that net that's on the left represents something called fibrin, which is in our body. And fibrin is like a net that lays down that has no good value. And as we age, we lay down more of it, and it makes tissues harder. It makes us wounds heal slower, and it's a function of aging. What eliminates fibrin is enzymes. Enzymes taken between meals, like an apple a day keeps the doctor away. What keeps the enzymes from getting rid of fibrin is elevated homocysteine levels. One point, a couple years ago, we had our DNA test. We don't have it right now. Some people out there, including myself, had a variation in their MTHFR gene, meaning they have a risk for elevated homocysteine levels, which causes inflammation in the arteries. Well, methylated B vitamins was sold to us from our DNA kit. Well, we don't have the DNA kit. But you guys, the Spectrum multivitamin is methylated B vitamins, so I take the Spectrum multi so I can help reduce those homocysteine levels, so my body has a better chance to eliminate that fibrin, because as it lays down in the arterial wall and then plaque lays down, kind of like that concrete there, well, when that plaque oxidizes, then I've got hardening of the arteries. And so what helps that plaque to not oxidize is two things: strong antioxidants like OPC3, and making sure that your HDL cholesterol is elevated and your LDL is low, because LDL is what loves to get hard, and that's what we want to avoid. So the gut is related to our overall health in so many ways. So here's 3 things to remember. What is it? 70% of the immune system is intimately related to the gut, and an imbalance in that gut can manifest in other areas of the body. IgA antibodies influence the immune system, and they're prevalent when we have a strong initial maternal inoculation, and methods of early feeding determine whether the immune system is normal or hyperactive. Numerous medications, stress, and diet can alter the intestinal ecology and create a hyperactive immune system, and increased oxidation occurs from a poorly developed GALT. So by improving the GALT in the intestines, the liver is spared of some of that toxic load, preserving our glutathione levels. Glutamine is not depleted. Glutathione levels are more stable. And so we want to improve that. And way back 12 years ago, I knew that one of the things I needed was supplemental nutrition, and I knew that this intestinal area was a compromise, so I needed nutrition that was already digested or delivered in an isotonic state, which is what is available to you as customer managers and available to your customers. And in looking at a protocol, if you will, that helps to improve the intestinal ecology, L-glutamine, as we discussed, improves the healthy intestinal area and is found in our NutriClean fiber and our Spectrum digestive enzymes. We have our aloe, which helps reduce that inflammation in the intestinal area. We have prebiotics that are known as inulin or fructooligosaccharides. It's in our NutriClean fiber and our Prime Bone Maintenance formula, as well as our greens. We have probiotics in our greens, spectrum probiotics and digestive enzyme formula, and our enzymes, which includes both the digestive enzymes and the spectrum enzymes, and of course our antioxidants like our OPC3. So I take fiber on a daily basis, aloe on a more of a seasonal basis as it has strong immune-enhancing properties. But I do take the enzymes and probiotics on a daily basis, and my greens and my OPC3. So the point is that improving the healthy intestinal area is not just for mothers, children, and you, but it's really for anybody who feels they have a compromised intestinal area. But the reality is when you come full circle, I'm just so grateful for finding Market America because it allowed me the opportunity to take 2.5 years off and complete a dream, which was to put this information into a trilogy. I didn't know it was going to be a trilogy when I started, but in the end I realized that, like I said, if you're critically ill, you don't care about Botox and money, you just want to get well. And that's what Saving Generation Next is about. But once you conquer your illness, whatever it is, you want to learn how to maintain good health effortlessly. How do the body systems connect? How does cholesterol relate to the gut? How does high blood pressure relate to stroke and whatnot? And so I want to maintain good health effortlessly, to slow the aging process naturally and normally, to live the promised 120 years. And if you can maintain your good health effortlessly, you start thinking about how can I have excellence both emotionally and financially. And the reality is that our relationship with ourselves dramatically affects our relationship with money. If you know anybody in Arizona, I'm going to be doing there next Saturday, doing a little free event. But the point is that if you want to think about it, just remember that what if I told you that whether you have something as minor as allergies to as serious as cancer, there's something in common, an imbalance in the intestinal area. And it's not so much we are what we eat, but we are what we absorb. Research shows there's a profound relationship between wellness and absorption. And I'm so blessed and grateful for those who have shared with me their stories. A friend of mine who had incredible challenges also told that there was no answers. And the reality is that he's 100% whole and healthy, and I'm so happy for Jennifer and her baby. But remember, you guys, in the beginning there was wellness, and the beginning that I refer to begins at birth. It begins with how a child is fed during the first year of life. But remember, today we can supplement with oligosaccharides. We can make changes that can affect the damage that compromises from years ago. And so, Big Al, I thank you for your time on the phone today. And if anybody wants that summary, you're welcome to go to the website, and there's a brief summary at DebbieWaldeck.com. But I appreciate all your time. I wish you all a great night, especially you guys on the East Coast. It's late, and I'm off, and I hope to see you again. Bye-bye.